Dr. Harrison Sterling thought he was looking at a dropout. He thought the 5-year gap in Beatrice Halloway's resume meant she was lazy. He looked at the woman across his desk, a woman who had stitched arteries back together in the back of a burning C-130 Hercules, and he told her she wasn't qualified to change bedpans at his hospital. He tossed her application in the trash. He didn't know that 20 minutes later, a catastrophe would bring the city to its knees. He didn't know that the dropout was the only person in the building with the clearance to save them. And he certainly didn't know that when he finally tried to background check her, the computer wouldn't give him a credit score. It would trigger a silent alarm at the Pentagon. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Beatrice Halloway adjusted the collar of her generic charcoal grey blazer and stepped out of the Uber. She looked up at the glass monolith of Providence Memorial Hospital. It was a palace of modern medicine, a place of glass atriums, marble floors, and donors with last names like Gates and Bezos. Beatrice didn't care about the marble. She just wanted the quiet. She wanted a job where the patients came in through automatic doors, not dragged out of rubble. She wanted a job where the biggest stress was insurance paperwork, not the chaotic rhythm of incoming mortar fire. She walked to the reception. "I have an interview with Dr. Sterling, 2:00 p.m. The receptionist, a young man named Kevin with perfect teeth, didn't look up from his screen. Name, Beatrice Halloway, applying for the ER nurse lead position. Take a seat. He's running late." He was 45 minutes late. When Beatrice was finally ushered into the office of Dr. Harrison Sterling, the chief of emergency medicine, she immediately recognized the type. Sterling was wearing a suit that cost more than her first car. He had a degree from Harvard on the wall framed in mahogany, and a look on his face that suggested he smelled something unpleasant. He didn't offer her a seat. He was already reading her file, a red pen in his hand, hovering like a hawk. "Ms. Halloway," Sterling said, not looking up. "I've been reviewing your application." "It's good to meet you, Doctor," Beatrice said, her voice steady. She stood at parade rest, hands clasped behind her back, before realizing she was doing it, and forcing her arms to her sides. Old habits. "Is it—" Sterling finally looked up. He had pale blue eyes that lacked warmth. "Because I'm failing to see why HR wasted my time with this." Beatrice blinked. "I beg your pardon." Sterling dropped the file on the desk. It landed with a disrespectful thwack. "Providence Memorial is a world-class institution, Ms. Halloway. We are ranked number 3 in the nation for trauma care. My staff are the elite. They come from Johns Hopkins Mayo Mass Gen. I'm aware of the hospital's reputation, Doctor. That's why I'm here." "Then you should know we don't hire drifters," Sterling said, tapping the paper. "I'm looking at your employment history. You have a nursing degree from a state university in Ohio. Fine. Serviceable. You worked for 2 years at a county hospital in Dayton. Also fine for a junior staffer." He paused, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "And then, nothing." Beatrice tightened her jaw. "Nothing, sir." "A 7-year gap," Sterling said, circling the empty space on the paper with his red pen. 7 years, Ms. Halloway. From 2018 to 2025, there is absolutely no record of employment, no hospital affiliations, no continuing education credits, no licenses active in the public database. "I was working abroad," Beatrice said calmly. "Contract work. Bartending in Bali, backpacking through Europe." Sterling scoffed. "Nursing is a perishable skill, Ms. Halloway. Medicine advances every day. You can't just take a 7-year vacation and expect to walk into a level 1 trauma center and lead a team." "It wasn't a vacation," The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Beatrice spoke. "And I assure you my skills are current." "Current?" Sterling laughed, a dry, barking sound. "Miss Halloway, do you know how to operate the newest ECMO machines? Have you used the Da Vinci She surgical system? Do you know the current protocols for mass casualty triage in an urban setting?" "Do I know triage?" Beatrice thought. "I invented the triage protocol used by the Joint Special Operations Command for high-value extraction. I adapt quickly," she said instead. "We don't have time for you to adapt," Sterling said, standing up to signal the dismissal. "I need a nurse lead who has been in the trenches, someone who can handle pressure, someone who hasn't spent the last decade finding themselves." He picked up her resume and held it over the trash can. "I suggest you try the urgent care clinic down on 4th Street. They deal with flu shots and sprained ankles. That seems more your speed." Beatrice watched him drop the paper. It fluttered into the bin. "Is that your final decision, Doctor?" "It is. Please close the door on your way out." Sterling turned his back to her, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt, already checking his reflection in the window. Beatrice stood there for a second. She could have told him. She could have told him about the night in the Hindu Kush where she performed a thoracotomy with a pocket knife and a sanitized straw. She could have told him that the gap in her resume was because her employer was the Department of Defense and her patients were names that appeared on the news and some that never would. But she didn't. The NDA she signed was ironclad. But more than that, she didn't want to be that person anymore. She wanted peace. "Thank you for your time," she said softly. She walked out, closing the door with a gentle click. She didn't slam it. Beatrice Halloway didn't need to make noise to be dangerous. Beatrice walked 3 blocks in the rain before ducking into a diner called Sal's. It was the kind of place that smelled of old coffee and bacon grease, a scent that for some reason always calmed her down. It reminded her of the mess halls on base before the sirens went off. She sat at a booth in the back facing the door, another habit she couldn't break. She ordered black coffee and stared out the window at the grey city. Her phone buzzed. It was a secure messaging app, the icon disguised as a calculator. Sender unknown. Message. Status report. Beatrice typed back, *rejected. Overqualified/underqualified. They think I've been unemployed for 7 years. Sender unknown. Message. I can make a call. General Mitchell owes you for his leg. 1 phone call to the board of directors, and you own that hospital. Beatrice smiled sadly. No, the deal was a clean break. No favors. I want to be normal handler. I want to be boring. Sender unknown. Message. You are a Tier 1 medical officer. You are the ghost. You are not boring. Give it a week. You'll be bored to tears and begging for a deployment. Beatrice put the phone down. The ghost. The nickname the Rangers had given her because she moved so quietly in the field, and because she snatched men from the grip of death when everyone else had given up. She looked at her reflection in the napkin dispenser. She looked tired. She was 34, but her eyes were 50. She had a faint, jagged scar running from her hairline into her ear, covered by her dark hair. Shrapnel from a breach charge in Syria. Dr. Sterling had called her a drifter. Refill, Hon. Beatrice looked up. The waitress, a woman named Marge with hair the color of strawberries, was hovering with a pot of coffee. Please, Beatrice said. Rough day? Marge asked, pouring the steaming liquid. You could say that. Apparently I'm not qualified to work. Marge snorted. "Resume trouble, honey. My nephew lied and said he knew how to fix HVACs. Now he runs a company. Fake it till you make it." "I think I'm done faking it," Beatrice murmured. She took a sip of the coffee. It was scaldingly hot. She let the burn ground her. She was thinking about buying a ticket back to Ohio, maybe working at her father's hardware store. Maybe Sterling was right. Maybe she didn't belong in the high-gloss world of civilian medicine. Suddenly the ground shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a percussive thump that Beatrice felt in her chest before she heard it. The window of the diner rattled violently. Car alarms began to wail instantly. Beatrice was out of the booth before the coffee cup hit the table. She didn't think. She moved. Her body took over. "What was that?" Marge screamed, dropping the coffee pot. It shattered, sending glass and brown liquid everywhere. Beatrice was already at the door, looking down 4th Street toward the intersection near Providence Memorial Hospital. A plume of black smoke was rising thick and oily, choking the sky. "Gas main," Beatrice said, her voice cutting through the panic in the diner. "Or a tanker." She stepped out onto the sidewalk. People were running away from the smoke. Beatrice stood still, assessing. 2 blocks away, a massive tanker truck had T-boned a city bus right in front of the construction zone for the new hospital wing. The tanker had ruptured. The explosion had taken out the front facade of the coffee shop next door and collapsed a pedestrian bridge. It was a mass casualty event. Beatrice checked her watch. 2:45 p.m., shift change at the hospital. The ER would be chaotic, but staffing would be double-layered for about 20 minutes. "Not my problem," a voice in her head said. "Sterling said you aren't qualified." She watched a woman stumble out of the smoke, bleeding from a head wound, screaming for her child. Beatrice cursed under her breath. "Damn it!" She reached into her purse, not for her phone, but for a small black pouch. She always carried her IFAC individual first aid kit, stripped down for civilian carry, but lethal in its efficiency. She started running, not away from the fire, but directly into the throat of the beast. As she ran, she saw the chaos. Traffic was gridlocked. Ambulances were trying to scream through, but the explosion had thrown debris across the road, blocking the main access to the ER entrance of Providence Memorial. The paramedics couldn't get to the victims. The victims couldn't get to the hospital. And the victims were trapped in the kill zone. Beatrice vaulted over the hood of a stalled taxi. She sprinted past a stunned police officer who yelled, "Ma'am, get back! Medical!" She shouted back, not stopping. She arrived at the crash site. It was hell. The heat from the burning tanker was intense. The bus was on its side, metal groaning. There were bodies on the pavement. Some moving, some not. A young paramedic was kneeling beside a man whose leg was pinned under a slab of concrete from the pedestrian bridge. The paramedic looked terrified. He was fumbling with a tourniquet, his hands shaking so hard he couldn't thread the buckle. "I can't get it tight," the kid yelled. Beatrice slid in beside him. Her knees hit the asphalt, grinding into the glass, but she didn't flinch. "Give it to me," she commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an order given with the weight of a Tier 1 operator. The paramedic froze, looking at this woman in a business suit. Beatrice snatched the tourniquet. In one fluid motion, she looped it high on the thigh, cranked the windlass until the bleeding stopped instantly, and locked it in place. "Write the time on his forehead," Beatrice said. "Check his airway. Move." "Who are you?" the kid stammered. Beatrice stood up, scanning the wreckage. She saw the bus. There were people trapped inside. The fire was spreading. "I'm the help," she said. "Now move!" She ran toward the bus. Inside the atrium of Providence Memorial, Dr. Harrison Sterling was shouting, "Why are the bays empty?" he roared at the charge nurse. "We have a code black. Where are the patients?" "The access road is blocked, doctor," the nurse Sarah yelled back. "The ambulances are stuck 3 blocks down. The debris field is too dense. Fire isn't clearing it fast enough." "Then get gurneys out there. We run them in on foot." Sterling adjusted his stethoscope, sweating. This was a nightmare. The media was already outside. If he mishandled a mass casualty event in downtown Seattle, his career was over. The board was watching. Sterling ran out of the ER bay doors, followed by a team of residents. They hit the cold air and the smell of burning rubber. They reached the edge of the police cordon. It was a disaster. The fire department was spraying foam on the tanker, but the victims were scattered in the warm zone, the area not quite safe, but where the dying were. "We need to wait for fire to clear the scene," a resident said. "Protocol says we don't enter the warm zone until the scene is secured." Sterling hesitated. The resident was right. Protocol was God. If a doctor went in there and got hurt, the liability would be astronomical. "Hold the line," Sterling ordered. "Triage here at the perimeter. Wait for fire to bring them to us." But then Sterling saw something. Through the smoke near the overturned bus, a figure in a dark blazer was moving. She wasn't waiting for the fire department. She wasn't waiting for permission. He squinted. It was the woman, the dropout, Holloway. "What is that civilian doing?" Sterling gasped. "Officer, get that woman out of there." But the officer was busy holding back a crowd. Sterling watched in horror, and then confusion as Beatrice Holloway climbed into the overturned bus through a shattered window. Inside the bus, the world was sideways. Smoke pooled at the ceiling, which was the right side windows. People were screaming. Beatrice crawled over the seats. "Listen to me." She projected her voice, a diaphragm-deep shout that cut through the noise. "If you can walk, get out the back emergency exit. Go now. Don't look for your bags. Go." A dozen terrified passengers scrambled toward the back. Beatrice moved toward the front. The driver was slumped over the wheel, dead. But behind him, a man in a business suit was pinned. A metal pole from the handrail had sheared off and impaled him through the shoulder, pinning him to the floor. He was conscious, gasping. Pink froth was bubbling at his lips. Tension pneumothorax, Beatrice diagnosed instantly. And he's pinned. "Help me!" the man wheezed. Beatrice checked his pulse. Thready. His trachea was deviating to the left. His lung had collapsed, and the pressure was crushing his heart. He had minutes, maybe seconds. She didn't have a chest decompression needle. She didn't have her kit. She looked around. The floor was littered with debris. She saw a ballpoint pen and a small bottle of hand sanitizer that had fallen from someone's purse. "This is going to hurt," she told the man. She poured the sanitizer over his chest and the pen. She unscrewed the pen, removed the ink cartridge, leaving the hollow plastic tube. She pulled a pocket knife from her blazer pocket. Sterling would have fainted if he knew she brought a weapon to an interview. 1, 2, 3. She made a small incision in the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. The man screamed. Beatrice jammed the hollow pen tube into the hole. Hiss. A rush of trapped air escaped. The man took a massive, gasping breath. His color returned instantly. "Okay, you're breathing," Beatrice said. "Now I have to get you off this pole." She couldn't pull the pole out. He would bleed to death. She had to cut him loose or wait for the fire department. But the fire was licking at the front of the bus. "Hey." Beatrice looked up. A fireman had poked his head in. "Lady,"